This is a piece that I've been sitting with for 2 years, and finally it got to a point where it was fully formed. So this is the first time I'm gonna talk about it in public. So I'm grateful to kind of bring the piece to work. This is like bring your piece to work day, right? So I'm glad to bring it with me and to talk with you all about it a little bit. I'm gonna do a little bit of reading, but also talking around the draft a little bit and just kind of projecting what's forward in it and what's behind and around it. So a little bit of reading, a little bit of talking around it. So what did you all think of the video? I asked this question to the 18 middle school youth who are still getting comfortable around one another in the second week of programming during a summer program at a community center in Pontiac, Michigan. We've just watched the music video for the 2012 song They Don't Know Me by Kodak, an independent hip-hop artist from our city. Not Kodak Black, by the way. He's not from Pontiac. Kodak will be with us tomorrow and for the rest of the week as the first of 4 weekly artists in residence for this summer program that I organized. Though most of the youth listen to hip-hop music and other genres, none of them have heard of Kodak or any of the artists from Pontiac, the city where both the youth and myself live. Natalia is the first student to respond to my questions, sitting right in front of the wobbly projector I've set up to show the video. I think it seemed like it was like an old style. Old style, I say, so tell everyone what an old style means. I respond, trying to get some details about, what an old style might mean. Kind of classic English teacher move, right? Like, a lot more different, she replies after a few moments of thinking, not quite getting to what I had hoped for. Like, a lot more different. What else do you think? I nudge forward. Ava, sitting over at one of the two tables, picnic tables, jumps into the conversation, noting how Kodak's face was close to the camera during one of the scenes of the video. So she says, he would need to be not so close to the camera to make the video better. Reggie then gives his take. It's decent. I redirect back to the group. All right, what else? Nolan, who's usually the first to speak and often over other people, puts his hand in the air to weigh in. I call on him, and he gives a 180-degree look at the people around him before weighing in. It's all right because, and then he changes direction, he don't know how to rap. Wow, Keenan says from the other table in response to Nolan's blunt evaluation. You're smiling, you've been in this situation, right? Right? Surprised at Nolan's take, I offer a bit of nervous laughter, and I respond, he don't know how to rap, as I gather my thoughts. Okay, so what does he need to do to better learn how to rap, in your opinion? I tag on to my question, which is a clear indicator about where I stand with this 13-year-old's evaluation of the 40-year craft of hip-hop emceeing, right? After my question, Jason, Tatiana, and Nolan all respond at the same time. Don't sound like that. Like, sing. Like, don't sing, rap. Jason says, be more like Sada Baby. So 3 responses all at the same time. Don't sound like that. Like, don't sing, rap, and be more like Sada Baby. So this opening narrative jumps us into the mix of a 6-week summer program that I organized in Pontiac. This is where Pontiac is. It's halfway between Detroit and Flint. It's a post-industrial city, one of the post-industrial cities on the east side of the state. So first time to Michigan, and that's where we are, Lansing, right? That's where Pontiac is. And in Pontiac, so people call Pontiac Yaktown, because like Pontiac, so yak, so you'll hear people refer to Pontiac as the Yak or Yaktown. Just as Detroit has the Detroit versus everybody brand, Pontiac has Yaktown Don't Back Down. And the network of people who are part of this scene that we've jumped into are a collective of individuals that I think about as Yaktown Sounds. So a group of music producers, educators who do things, music and sound with youth in and around Pontiac, Michigan. So this opening scene that's dropped us into the narrative, it's really situated within the two of the fields that I work in. One is English education and the other is hip-hop studies. So in English education, we're oftentimes thinking about questions about language and literacy practices and community spaces and sometimes schools in which young people learn about themselves and about expression and performance. And also we're interested in how teachers interact with young folks and educate them about reading, about writing, about literacy practice, about creative practices. And as you can see, this is also interested in hip-hop studies, right? So in these types of spaces that I like to be in, and that are really an outgrowth of my life as a creative person. So much longer than I've been a professor, I've been a record collector, a vinyl enthusiast, a DJ, and a beat maker. So a lot of times this work is just an outgrowth of who I am as a person, rather than this really kind of structured, formal work thing. And I can't always tell the difference between the two of those, and that's exactly how I like it. So in these types of spaces that I like to organize, and they give me a lot of joy to organize, oftentimes there's beat making taking place, okay? There is creative writing taking place with one another, and even this picture, and this is from the community center where this took place. To me, there's so much instructive even in this picture. So you have, right, like for my favorite collaborative tool, which is a headphone splitter, so we can all listen to the same thing at the same time. So we have one cord coming out here. These two young gentlemen are both listening to it at the same time, right? The share the earbud, right? And then of course this young man over here is plugged in as well, so they're listening to the same beat, nodding their heads, kind of writing stuff. If you see the video here, Jalen is like talking out loud his lyrics as he's writing them. So so this is the kind of creative interaction that takes place in these spaces. And then of course, sometimes trying things out and performing things with one another. So these are the types of really robust learning spaces that give me the most joy and the most excitement in my professional and my personal life. So they're the kinds of spaces that I try to cultivate for young and not so young people to connect over one another. So in this scene that I've dropped us into, this portion of the mix, if you will, there's something getting in the way of what I had intended, right? Natalia hears an old style. Nolan makes a judgment about what counts as rap, and Tatiana keys directly into sound. We also hear for the first time, and certainly not the last time in this article, a charismatic rapper from the east side of Detroit named Sada Baby. Anybody know who Sada Baby is? Okay, a couple folks. Let me rephrase that. One person. Right? So we hear for the first time, and not the last time in this article, about Sada Baby. Directly or indirectly, each of these responses deals with sound. Directly or indirectly, each of them deals with sound. And each of their responses is colliding with my own decision to show a video of a local hip-hop artist and my larger design of this multi-literacies learning community. So how they're hearing, their ideas about sound, what sound should sound like, what kind of sounds belong there, they're all colliding. They're moving through the space and colliding with what I have designed and my intentions as an educator. So this piece is a lot about me trying to come up with ways to understand what's happening and what was getting in the way, rather than having this real prescriptive recommendation for this is how things should work in a space like this. Some pieces that we write, I feel like, are ways to develop concepts, to try to understand what was happening that we didn't necessarily have the language or concepts to understand when it was happening. And that's part of the reason why I've sat with this piece for 2 years and trying to make sense of what was happening in this 6-week program that happened 2 summers ago. So in this article, I draw from the interdisciplinary field of sound studies to explore these collisions, the collisions between sound, what sounds you think belong there, and my own intentions as a facilitator. My exploration is guided by the following question. How do sounds, attunements to particular organizations of sounds, and youth listening practices collide across this English language community learning space? Following this question, I developed the concept of disorganizing sound to join conversations around hip-hop curricula and youth cultural production, community and asset-based creative spaces, and an emerging body of multi-literacies and curriculum scholarship that keys into sound. And even my use there of disorganizing sound, like they're dissing Kodak, right? Like when Nolan says he don't know how to rap, there's a diss happening there. So in a little bit I'll talk about this disorganizing sound and what I mean by that. But even up front, the intentionality of that diss is to at least acknowledge the fact that they're dissing him based upon his sound. So overall, this article is directed toward English education scholars. This article leads English education scholars and teachers to consider how the sonic collisions reverberating across learning spaces might retune the subject of English to young people's lives. Everybody follow me so far? All right. So, skip the boring stuff. So, the ways that this paper pushed me the most to grow and learn was really around the theoretical concepts that I had to understand in order to make sense of what was happening in this short portion of the mix. So I want to talk a little bit about the reading that I did to develop these concepts to inform the way I understand what's happening. Leveraging sound as a conceptual tool, disorganizing sound is a concept I develop and apply in this article to understand how sounds, attunements to organizations of sounds, and listening practices through which youth and really all of us experience sounds collide with different aspects of learning space. It took me a long time to write that sentence, by the way, to just kind of like get it what I wanted it to be. My theorizing around disorganizing sounds in this article draws inspiration from Brown, thank you Bria, earlier for doing all the work for me. I can just keep it moving. So it draws from Ruth Nicole Brown's work in Soul Hot. And specifically how Brown attends to black girlhood sound in Soul Hot practice. So if you read her work closely, there's certain ways that she theorizes around black girlhood sound in Soul Hot practice. So Brown draws upon Tricia Rose, who some folks were talking about a little bit earlier, to theorize black girlhood sound and the way it resists, improvises, and echoes around neoliberal youth programming constraints. So when Rose writes about hip-hop, she talks about how hip-hop is a style that nobody can deal with. So the importance of style within hip-hop and having your own type of unique style that is so powerful that it's instantaneously recognizable as yours. So B-boys and B-girls and breakers talk about the silhouette style. So if we were put up a sheet and there was a dancer behind it and you saw only the silhouette of that person dancing, that their style is so distinct, you would know it was them just by the silhouette of how they were dancing. So the shapes and angles and rhythms of their bodies. So the style that nobody can deal with is a concept that Rose talks about. I believe she's actually quoting Fab Five Freddy in the midst of that. So a style that cannot be easily understood or erased, a style that has the reflexivity to create counter-dominant narratives against a mobile and shifting enemy. So Brown draws upon Tricia Rose in this way. Brown conceptualizes black girlhood as a sound nobody can organize. Black girlhood sound is a sound nobody can organize. Brown's gesture towards organization here is twofold. First, it signals gendered and racialized listening practices that work to organize black girlhood sounds by compressing them, just like how we compress sound, into superficial binary identity positions like sass and silence, and into white mainstream notions of politeness and civility. Second, this gesture towards organization signals the way that black girlhood sounds resist, improvise, and echo around these would-be compressions. And you can see even with me saying echoing around, in this paper I'm trying to both think about sound, but then also think with sound. So use sonic concepts as ways of thinking about what's happening. So even my language about echoing around there is trying to think with sound. So these conceptions of sound and organization from Brown inform my notions of disorganizing sound in two ways. First, the concept directs me toward youth attunements to sounds and ideas related to how things should sound, especially by way of what I'll call generational listening practices. So like follow me through here because this wades a little bit. So with generational listening practices, I draw from sound studies work on how listening operates as a contextualized, positioned, and socially informed set of practices. So Stover takes up listening in this manner with her concept of the listening ear and how listening works. With a focus on race and racism and racialized listening, she outlines that listening, and I'll give you a chance to read this on your own. Right? She continues later on in her opening chapter. I'll let you read this. You didn't know I was going to make you read, did you? Right? So Stover's taking up listening in the listening ear with regard to race and racism. In a similar way, where Stover takes up listening in context with race, in this paper I take up listening in context with age, aging, and the generational position from which youth and all of us listen. Okay? So, for example, later in this paper, I get into these nuanced conversations with the youth about how it sounds. And one of the issues that they have with Kodak's song is that they say he's singing and rapping in the same song. Now, how I hear it, I'm like, there's no singing in here. But there's a certain point when he intonates his voice in a certain way that to them, from their generational listening practices, sounds like listening. Now, the youth tell me, now there's this part where Jason, who said he should be more like Sada Baby, he's asking my co-facilitator, like, how old is he? Is he like an old school rapper? Like, what era is he from? He's trying to figure out. And my co-facilitator says in this side conversation, he's current. Like, he actually is on tour right now. And once Jason realizes, oh, he's current and he's not a quote-unquote old school rapper, he busts off, oh, he sucks. He sucks. Oh, he sucks. And I video record all of our sessions, and we try to document a lot of stuff we're doing, so when I rewatch this, I can see it happening. And as we tease this out in the article, it's not that singing as he hears it and rapping don't belong in the same song. It's that that's an old school style. They say, oh, Tupac used to do that. And we can get into like the really compressed hip hop temporal framework that they're working in. Like, Tupac is not old school. And there's a whole conversation about how Tupac, died before any of these young people were born, but he's still a touchstone for them. So there's a whole interesting conversation there. But for them, these two types of sounds don't belong in the same song presently. Everybody following me, right? So from their generational listening practices, there are certain organizations of sound they can go together, just not right now. And that was unlocked once Jason realized that Kodak is a current rapper and not a quote-unquote old school rapper. Second, there's a second point that Brown informs the way I'm thinking about this. Brown informs my notion about disorganizing sound by directing me toward how sounds organize, disorganize, and perhaps reorganize aspects of the learning space while the sounds are in motion. Reverberation is a key idea here, and this is another instance in which I'm trying to not just think about sound, but think with sound. Reverberation is a sonic phenomenon and technique that plays prominent roles in Black diasporic sonic expressions. Anybody listen to dub music? Okay, right? So its role in affect is most prominent through dub. The sound studies reader, Veal, talks about how rupture and fragmentation of a song in dub is a sonic metaphor for the conditions of diaspora. Okay, so the echoing, the erosion, the collisions among sound. In this way, reverberation and echo are not simply characteristics of music, but structural embodiments of Jamaican history and culture. Thinking with sound, Gershon, who's a curriculum studies scholar, he notes that resonance and reverberation then can be used both theoretically and methodologically to conceptualize the never-ending ebb, flow, and interactions of any given thing in relation to ecologies, right? So think about echo and reverberation as a way to understand how items are circulating and colliding with one another. So one more point conceptually, and then I just want to talk about one more way that I use this in the analysis. So thinking with reverberation and disorganizing sound keys me into the omnidirectional collisions across youth programming. So here I'm talking about how generational listening practices, youth's attunement and judgments, including the ways they diss what's happening, about what sounds count as rap, and my own interactions, my own intentions as a facilitator, how these collide and interact with one another for unexpected outcomes. So most specifically, reverberation affords me language around Sada Baby, the charismatic rapper who youth sounded into the mix at the early portion. This is Sada Baby. I don't know which photo to show you, so I just figured I'd show you all the ones that Google said was him. So there's an algorithm we're working here. So in this piece, I'm trying to think about a way to understand how Sada Baby exists all throughout this program, even though his body isn't in the room, okay? So I'm gonna play for you 4 seconds of a song because this was a clue to me understanding it. So as over the course of the 6 weeks, there's many instances in which youth would say, sometimes to subvert what was happening, you bring a Sada Baby next week? What about Sada Baby? Or sometimes they would say, oh yeah, like Scuba Steve. Now 2 years ago, I didn't know who Sada Baby was. Matter of fact, there's an interesting point that Gershon makes in his work. He says that sounds are always misheard. Okay? So when I look back at the video recordings of our sessions, now I can hear youth talking about Sada Baby. At the time, I heard those words, but I didn't know it was a reference to a charismatic rapper from the east side of Detroit, right? At one point, they said something about Scuba Steve. Scuba Steve is a minor character from this random Adam Sandler movie in the 90s. And I'm thinking to myself, this doesn't add up. Why would they be talking about Scuba Steve? Later on, I would find out Scuba Steve is one of Sada Baby's aliases, right? Another thing that happens over the course of this program is in our conversations about what counts as rap, one youth, Jason, would often say, "Nah, to rap, you gotta have a tone in your voice like this. Oh boy, I ain't playing no games." He would do his voice over and over like that, right? And over the course of time, I found this.
Oh boy! Oh boy!
Right? So this is one of those instances when it was hidden in plain sight, or to not use the visual, it was misheard, right? So youth were sounding Sada Baby into the mix in all these ways that it took me 2 years to understand, okay? So I've tried to think about how reverberation is a way to understand how Sada Baby's literal sound was moving across the program, or how Sada Baby in himself is a reverberation. So both him reverberating and he as a reverberation in this program. So reverberating, he stays in motion across our conversations, our spatial imaginaries of Detroit and Pontiac, and even now, echoing through my writing, as I'm writing this, as I occasionally toggle over to his SoundCloud page or one of his videos on YouTube and my internet browser tab, as I play his songs, and I wonder if I'll hear something different in his music that will make me tune in differently to what youth said in the program. So even as I write, I'm thinking about how he is reverberating through my writing, where there may be other parts that were other aspects of the program that were happening where he was echoing throughout, and I'm not yet attuned into those. All right? So that's conceptually what's happening in this piece, and at the end, I try to direct a couple implications for the field of English education, because that's the audience for this. So one point that I try to tease out is what happens if we attune to sound and not just words with the texts that are brought in classrooms, especially when it comes to hip-hop based education or hip-hop pedagogy. So hip-hop is taken up in a lot of classrooms, but oftentimes it's stripped of the sonic qualities of it and it's just printed on the page. I would argue that there's both the spoken word, there's both the beat, and then the cultural associations of the beat if it's sample-based, and then the sound of the voice that's all creating a meaning within it, right? Sada Baby didn't say, "Oh boy, I don't play no games," right? His voice, "Oh boy," right, is doing something with his voice that youth were mimicking. So I talk about how the attention to sound can unlock additional pedagogical capabilities of these kinds of texts, but then also what it would mean to think about attuning English language arts education to the reverberations that are across young folks' lives, right? So if we think about reverberation as a conceptual tool to understand the things that hit our bodies, move through us, and organize, disorganize, and reorganize what's in our lives, what would classrooms look like if they tune into those types of reverberations? All right. Thanks for listening.